Hi, my name's Anwen Jones.
And I'm Bex Griffiths.
And we've come to some woods that's really local to me just to have a look at some of the herbs that are growing at the moment. So we're going to show you growing in the wild some of the things that we've been talking about in our previous videos, and we'll also introduce you to some new herbs.
So we're both herbalists. We work in Bristol. We run a clinic and we do a lot of courses on local native herbs. So we wanted to bring you to the woods. First of all, I wanted to show you a couple of books that we think are really useful. My very well-thumbed Hedgerow Medicine by Julie Bruton-Seal and Matthew Seal, Julie's a herbalist in Norfolk. And this is a really great book to start with because it has about 40 different UK native herbs. I'm just going to show you the list of them. Then it tells you how to ID them, what they're used for.
Really good pictures and recipes.
A few recipes. And then there's Wildflowers of Britain by Roger Phillips, and who is a botanist in the UK, and he's written a book on trees, a book on mushrooms. We like Wildflowers to Britain. It's not the only ID plant book that we use, but we like it because it goes in seasons. So if you've got like a yellow flower and it's like March, you'll go to the kind of beginning of the book. If it's July, you go further into the middle, and that can kind of just narrow things down a bit more easily. And you can get them really cheap secondhand.
So yeah, armed with our books, we're going to take you into the woods for a little stroll.
Our basket. So spring is one of my favourite times to forage because you literally can walk a metre and there's about like 10 different herbs that we could ID and forage. I'm just going to start with a couple of leaves down here. This is plantain. So in our other video when we were in the herb garden, and we showed you ribwort, which is kind of like the thin plantain, but this is Plantago ovata, which is like the thicker, rounder, greater plantain, and we use them interchangeably. So they are great lung tonics, they're anti-inflammatory, they stop bleeding, and they're amazing drawing agents. You can make a poultice of plantain and kind of bandage it on your splinter, and after about 24 hours soak it in warm water, then maybe repeat it, and that kind of really deep splinter can come out. So that's really useful and it's so common. And then this one is yellow dock, and this is like one of the herbs that we talked about in our first video around mineral tonics, like building resilience through taking lots of herbs daily that are high in minerals and vitamins. So yellow dock, it's the normal dock that people see around and been taught as kids to rub on nettle stings. Actually, and that's the thing with plantain. Plantain is a great anti-inflammatory, so you kind of rub it together, get the green juice and put it on your nettle stings. So yellow dock, it has like these kind of purple colourings, and actually this is one that I dug up earlier with more purple colourings, and it's kind of got these thin leaves with curly edges, and when you dig it up you will get a yellowish root, and later on in the season that root will be thicker and more yellow, and this is really high in iron, other minerals, and helps you absorb iron. So it's the root that we use.
So this is a really dense patch of herbs here. There's lots of useful things here that we've already talked about. Here we've got the nettle, and these nettles are getting quite old now. I've been using nettles a lot for the last couple of weeks, well, for the last few months really, and when they start to get this big, I can still use the tips, but once they start to flower, then we stop using the nettle leaf, because there's a chemical change that happens when the plant flowers that means that the leaves can become slightly irritating to the kidneys to use. So what I would do now is gather the last few tops and then maybe chop the nettle patch down, so when it regrows it has lots of lovely fresh new growth that we can just start using again. The other thing we've got here is the sticky willy that we talked about making a cold infusion of Cleaver's tea, which is something that's really great for helping move the lymphatic system, to help rid the body of waste products, to help get everything moving in the spring. So that's really nice. Here's some wild garlic. So you've probably seen lots of people posting online about you can make pesto and all kinds of delicious things out of the wild garlic. It's very high in some quite sulfurous compounds that are very helpful, very warming, particularly to the lungs. So you can help, again, it gets the circulation moving. It helps move mucus off the lungs. And these are the flowers here of the wild garlic. And then just something else to show. If you're picking wild garlic, you have to be very careful not to accidentally pick this one. So if you can see this leaf here, it has these lobes at the bottom, it's quite shiny. It does look very different to the wild garlic, but it can sometimes accidentally be harvested together. And this one is very toxic, is very caustic. So if you were to eat it, it would cause blistering on the tongue and on the lips. So it's definitely one to avoid. What else do we have here? So we have some yellow dead nettle here. The leaves look a bit like stingy nettles, but they don't have any sting. And they have these very lovely yellow flowers, quite similar to a white dead nettle that you'll see around at the moment a lot. And these are both quite uplifting and gladdening. They make a very nice tea. And we would put, particularly the white dead nettle, we put it in our women's tea blend for uterine, toning the uterus, and for using for regulating menstruation.
So around a few more herbs that we want to talk about. I just wanted to say, if you feel like you're not sure what the herb is, please don't pick it and please don't use it. You have to be, this is a small guide, we just want to show you what's out now, but if you're not really safe in your knowledge, then it's not safe. So don't use anything that you're not like 100% sure you know what it is. So we wanted to show you burdock. This is like the big burdock leaves, and they can grow really big. And in their second year, they'll grow and have like thistle heads, like purple thistle heads, which will seed. And in Chinese medicine, they use the seeds, but we actually use the root of burdock. And it's like a really kind of tuberous root, really high in minerals. We use it often with dandelion to help remove waste products from the body. So that's like dandelion and burdock. That's why they were traditionally used together to help remove waste products. And then actually I wanted to show you woodavon. So it's not going to be the easiest thing to identify right now, but it will come up with a little yellow flower and really soft leaves where there's like two little leaflets clustered onto the stem. And it's actually the root that we use. I'm going to try and dig up a little bit of root. It's quite thin roots like this. And if you taste one of these roots, it tastes like cloves and cinnamon together, and actually contains the chemical eugenol, which is in cloves. So it makes a really great anti-inflammatory, antiseptic mouthwash and a throat gargle. So if you feel like you're coming down with something scratchy in your throat, then chopping up the root, boiling and simmering for 20 minutes, and then gargling can really help. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is hawthorn. This is the Mayflower. It's really in bloom now. It often blooms a few days before May, which is on Friday. But it's early because we've had such a warm April. We use the leaves and the flowers, and the reason why we want to talk about hawthorn now is like the kind of laminated sheet that we showed you right at the beginning, and probably through most of the videos, about building resilience with herbs. We've got a whole thing on inflammation and trying to use as many herbs as possible with polyphenols, particularly flavonoids in them, because those chemicals, flavonoids, are really anti-inflammatory and help with the integrity of blood vessels, help repair tissue. Really important right now because there's some links with COVID-19, inflammation, blood clotting, and the risk of with people with heart problems and cardiovascular problems. So really supporting that system and taking as many flavonoids as possible. So flavonoids are in all the brightly coloured fruit and veg, and really high in the leaves and the berries and the flowers of hawthorn. And it's like, this looks white, it's a white flower, green leaf, but actually when we tincture it and when we make a tea, the tea is actually red and the tincture is actually red. So you'd imagine that from the berries, because they're the red berries in the autumn, but not from the leaves and the flowers, and they're containing all those flavonoids, which are really anti-inflammatory. And we use it to support all cardiovascular heart problems. It's a really safe herb. You can have it as a tea, as a tincture, just harvest the flowers and the leaves and dry them.
So Bex was just showing you the hawthorn tree. When I was young, my grandmother used to tell me to eat the hawthorn leaves in the springtime, and they have a little bit of a nutty taste, which I quite like. It reminds me of childhood. But she used to call it bara sakuru, which is Welsh for bread, cheese and beer. I'm not sure exactly where the beer part comes from, because in England, since moving to England, I've discovered that other people call it bread and cheese. And that could be because it's nice, it's edible. It could be because the flowers and the leaves together look like a plate with a piece of cheese on. It could be because the berries have got quite a cheesy texture. Who knows where these things come from, but it's it's a good one to pick. And then something else that we have here, Bex has already been gathering and making medicines out of these ivy leaves. So you can see them growing up the tree here. So the ivy leaves are very expectorant, which means they help you bring mucus up off the chest. So we're going to be making a lot more things with ivy leaves this spring. So just to reiterate what you do with the ivy leaves is you always make sure that you collect the young ivy leaves, because as they get a bit older, they start to get a bit dusty. So we'd be going for the smaller leaves here and not these sort of big old ones here that might be a bit dusty. So once we've gathered the leaves, we'll give them a little wash just to make sure that there's no dust on them. They can gather a little bit of irritant dust. So we'll take the ivy leaves home, give them a wash and then dry them out a little before using them to make tea. It's best if the tea is boiled and simmered for a little while first, and we can make tinctures out of them as well.
So that's the end of our short herb walk. We hope that you can at least get close to like some herbs. There's a lot of hawthorn in the cities, cleavers, plantain, you're not more than 10 metres away if you start looking, nettle. So just be careful where you harvest, don't harvest near really busy roads. Try and not harvest right by fences that could be sprayed, and try to be really conscious of when you're harvesting. You don't want to strip a place. It should look exactly the same when you leave as when you arrived. And just know that some people might be harvesting in the same area, so be as conscientious as you can. So see you next time.